You're tuned into the Johnversations Podcast, and this is episode number 54. As always, I'm your host, John Connor, saying thank you for spending a little bit of time with us this week. My guest today is the founder of the travel company Be a Shark. For years, she has shared her passion for these apex predators with fellow enthusiasts. Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, please welcome Ms. Nikki Brant-Sevy. Nikki, thank you so much for being here. So happy to have you.
Thank you. And I'm going to start by saying it's Sevy, which is not what it looks like.
Okay. So I have a friend, one of my friends, shout out
Levy.
Shout out to my friend Jay Sevy or Jay Sevy, he's an amazing artist.
Right.
But I read it and there's no A in there. So it's like my brain wants to say Sevy. And then I also watched the Aaron Paul video that you posted.
And he said it wrong.
And I was like, well, if Aaron Paul is saying it that way, that's probably, and we could talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah,
I think
that's fabulous. Yeah. He's allowed to say that wrong.
Yeah. He's a darling of a man, I will say.
Yeah. When I got married, my husband and I rock, paper, scissors for who would take each other's last name because we have weird last names, and I lost.
Okay. So
I'm a Sevy now.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. How have you been? I know, COVID has been a big thing, and we've been talking, for almost a year now through Instagram, and you've sent me. I still have it right here. I've got my sweet shark knit hat.
Fabulous.
The weather is getting warm, so I haven't been wearing it, in the warm weather, but it's always on hand. But you sent me some photos of like your extreme social distancing and things like that. Like how has COVID and all that been for you?
In a lot of ways, it's taught me to appreciate things a lot more. Not being able to go to Guadalupe, I started going to see the white sharks in 2008, and I've gone at least once a year. So not being able to go just forced me to really think about how much I appreciate when I'm there. And I had to spend a lot of time really figuring out what other things do I like to do? Where else am I entertained? And luckily, I have a lot of friends from the shark community, so I was able to stay in touch with everyone. We normally talk via, text or cell anyway, because we don't live in the same place. So my social circle is not people that are here with me locally. So that wasn't different, but not being able to travel to see people was a little bit difficult. If you're used to getting out, it's not as easy to stay home.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I live in Nashville. My whole family lives in Michigan, and I've had, since COVID's happened, I've had a nephew that was born that I haven't been able to go. I just had a niece who was born. So it's like, it's really, I'm used to going home like once a year and seeing everybody. So it really kind of throws you for a loop when you're like, this is something I didn't realize I look forward to doing this so much every year. And now that I can, it's like, oh man, well, when do I get to do it again? And I'm sure with Guadalupe, I mean, you're on the ocean and beautiful weather. You're experiencing these just crazy predators so close. I'm sure there's an extra layer of just like, is this over yet? Can this please be over?
Right. And most people think because I work with sharks, I live near the ocean, and I am in a landlocked state. I'm in Utah. So I haven't seen the ocean for a while, and you don't realize what it brings to you when you're an ocean person. And I love the mountains. I love where I live. But not being able to stick my toes in the sand and get a little salt water has been difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like, we've obviously, we've had you and Ranikin on the show who he goes out with you, and he's an amazing photographer, and you guys kind of do Be a Shark together. And just talking to him, it seems like if you've got this passion that it really is kind of like ingrained in your DNA or in your blood. So I'm sure that it's like, I don't know, it's got to feel like you're missing like a relative or a loved one, like a piece of yourself is gone.
It has, but at the same point, I've gone with people who took it for granted from day one. Like they got in the water, they saw their first shark, and it's almost like they crossed it off their bucket list and they were ready to move on to something else. So having been 25 times to Guadalupe now, missing a year, I think, has been good because I don't expect to get in the cage again and take it for granted. Not that I was taking it for granted, but you get to the point where you're like, oh, I've seen that shark, or I've seen them do this, or this is behavior that's common. And you don't mean to lose a little of the magic, but you kind of can't help it over the years. So not being there has forced me to really appreciate every single second. Even when you're in the cage and nothing is happening, there's still stuff out there. You still need to stay and look. Whereas in the past, I may have gotten out. Now I think I'll have to be pulled out at the end of the day when the dives are over.
Like, Nikki, come on. You're like 5 more minutes. You're like a little kid at the pool.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to ask you this. Talk to me a little bit about, because, again, through our conversations and things like that. And also you let me know that this is the first podcast that you ever listened to or watched. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. But, I was kind of curious as to, obviously, like, you didn't graduate high school and say, like, all right, now I'm going to go cage diving with sharks and take all these people out. So, talk to me a little bit about how did you find that love, I guess? Yeah.
Actually, tomorrow's my 51st birthday. And believe it or not, I didn't even start into the shark diving until 2008. So it's only been 13, 14 years. I first got interested in sharks when my family decided to go to Hawaii when I was 8. And Jaws had come out, and one of my cousins thought it would be really funny to show the movie to me before I went, which didn't help because I learned how to swim before I could walk, and I really wanted to swim in the ocean. But then I see this movie, and it's kind of terrifying. So I went to sleep one night, and as weird as it is, my brain was trying to help me process all of this. So I had a dream that I was in Hawaii and I met the kids from the movie, and they said, "Hey, we want you to come meet our pet shark." So I went with them in the dream and I met the shark, and it was nice and there was nothing to worry about. So my 8-year-old brain kind of turned the movie that made everyone afraid of sharks around for me, so that when I went to Hawaii, I didn't have to be scared of the ocean. And from that point on, it's just always been something that I thought, I really want to see this. So fast forward a long ways, in 2007, when the markets were starting to crash a little bit, I was working at Citibank, and greatest job ever. Rewards and recognition. We'd throw parties for 500-600 people, take them to Mexico, take them to Puerto Rico. But I knew I was going to lose my job. And I thought, okay, I now have a period of time where I'm going to be unemployed. So what do I want to do? What do I want to cross off that I've always said I would do, that I now have a window? So I got online, I booked my very first shark trip, and it's kind of been history since then. And I went through a different company. I was still, at that point, I got a job working as a caregiver. So did that for a few years. Every year I found a way to get the money together to go back to Guadalupe. And then a couple years ago, when I met Ewan, we realized that there were some things missing from the experience. Like, the first time I went to Guadalupe, nobody told me it wasn't like a cruise. So I took cruise wear on a trip that you wear shorts and a t-shirt. So
you're like, I'm here for the dinner buffet.
Exactly. So I had no idea. I overpacked. I did everything wrong that you could do wrong to prepare. So when Ewan and I talked about it, we said, let's put something together where it's more like a family environment, where we talk to people in advance and we help them understand what the experience is going to be like, so that once they're there, they can just enjoy being there. They don't have to stress over, did I pack right? Do I have the seasick meds I need? Did I forget something? They can just settle in and enjoy that thing that we enjoy so much. So I kind of just took, a career of doing very unique and bizarre things and turned it into doing the one thing that I'd always wanted to do.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this: and also, happy early birthday!
Thank you. Yeah,
I really appreciate you being here the night before. So
yes,
that is awesome. Thank you so much. What was that conversation like? Were you married at this point and things like this? So with your friends and family, what was that conversation like? Where you're like, hey guys, just gonna start taking people out to hang out with sharks. How did that go?
When I first booked my trip, my husband's a really good sport, and he said, all right. So I booked him. He's really good at Sherpaing my luggage, which is awesome. So he came along for that first trip and he really enjoys it. When I told my parents I was doing it, my mom just laughed and said, call me when you get home. Just because I think they were accustomed at that point to me having kind of wild hares and just going after them. But when Ewan and I decided we were going to do this as a business, the support was unbelievable. Like we had a lot of folks who said, I wish I'd had that kind of upfront guidance. Because, you can't really like ask your neighbor or your postman or somebody about shark diving. They haven't done it. So getting to talk to people before they go is really what set us apart and what we wanted to do. So my friends and family, most of whom have still not gone with me because they're chickens, were supportive of the business idea.
That's awesome. It's, especially just thinking about like, even when I started this podcast, just going to my wife and being like, hey, I want to spend a good amount of money just to get like a nice microphone and just to sit in a spare bedroom and talk to people. Yeah. And she was like, great. Gives you something to do. That's awesome. So it's important to have that support and people that are in your corner, even if the idea sounds, a little outlandish compared to their own experiences,
Exactly. And they're thankful I'm talking to you about sharks because they've all heard it. And they're all tired of hearing it.
We're going to put it on the internet. Anybody on the internet will be able to hear this. So fantastic. So I wanted to, you had mentioned something to me called the feather theory. I know when we were talking, and I was wondering if you might be able to kind of expand on that a little bit, or for people who are listening, kind of fill them in on what that theory is and your thought process behind it, because I was like, oh, this is going to be something that's going to be really fun to talk about. So.
Yeah, I've never been good at following the regular path. Like if you get a job and you take the career and you go from this step to this step and kind of do that. I date myself with this reference, but the movie Forrest Gump, which I think most people have seen, if you notice, it starts off with a feather that kind of floats in. And that feather follows Forrest through the entire film. And I started thinking about it one day and realized that my career has been like following a feather. I got out of college, couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So I took a part-time job at a call center. And that part-time job ended up turning into a management training job at the call center. And again, where the steps were like this, I kept seeing opportunities that were over here. And they might not have been more pay. They might not have been better in other people's eyes. But to me, that feather just kind of floated to that side. So I would take that job. And it always seemed to work out in that it gave me skills and abilities and contacts that when the feather floated again, and I ended up with no human resources experience, but working in an international HR team. So by following that feather around and be willing to take chances and do my own path instead of the same path that people lay out for you when you get out of college, I ended up exactly where I always wanted to be, which is running Be a Shark.
Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing because, being someone who, when I'm not doing this, I have a day job, and it's a very corporate, I don't talk about it a lot because of the fact that it is a very kind of corporate job. And we talk about some things on the show that aren't necessarily the most corporate friendly, right. But it's so easy, I think, for people to, especially like you said, you get a job at a call center and then all of a sudden you've got health insurance and you've got, you've got a decent paycheck and you're able to, pay your mortgage. And I think it's so easy for people to kind of get into that routine where it's like, okay, well, I'm able to take care of all the things that I need to. And you just kind of become complacent. Right. What is it in you, do you think, that kind of causes you or drives you to be like, well, no, that looks interesting. Like I'm going to jump in, no pun intended, but like jump in with both feet. Yeah. What do you think drives that behavior?
I thought I had a picture right here. It's actually my dad. My dad was one of the most amazing people in the world when it came to knowledge and education. And he always taught me that you need to gain knowledge for no other reason than to know if you're being lied to, which I thought was fabulous. But it put me on this course in my life where I go down rabbit holes. Like I'll start to read something about crocheting. I see your crochet book. Next thing you know, I've gone down this big path and I'm talking to people who crochet and I'm crocheting my own shark hats. But it goes back to the fact that my dad, from the time I was very young, encouraged any type of knowledge. So whatever weird thing I would start learning about, he wanted to hear about it. And he would ask questions and participate with me. So I was just raised to find weird things, pursue them. If I didn't love them, no big deal. I learned from them, but move on to something else, gain some knowledge there. And ultimately, the biggest thing I think it's done for me is made it easy to communicate with a lot of people, because my knowledge base is fairly broad because I've fallen down so many educational rabbit holes that I can almost always find something in common with people.
And that again, I think that's incredible. And especially in today's climate where there is so much information, just to have the mindset of like, no, I'm going to learn as much about, what I can, you know what I mean? And then I don't know. I think it's, I'm sure when you're looking at people who are coming to be like, yeah, I want to get in a cage with, giant sharks swimming around me. I'm sure you're meeting a whole bunch of different types of personalities. I'm sure it's not just like, it's all Bob from Wyoming, you know what I mean? But you're getting people from all over the country. Do you think when you talk about like creating experience and kind of that network and that community and touching base beforehand, do you think having that personality trait where it makes you easier to deal with people, like how is that? I imagine it's been pretty beneficial for you in what you do as far as kind of building this community. Does it seem like it helps a lot?
Yeah, without a question. I think there are other companies that take people shark diving that cater to what I'm going to call the dude bros. Like the people who are there for one experience to cross one thing off their aggressive aggro list, and then they're moving on. And honestly, most people who want to shark dive aren't that person. It's someone who saw Jaws. It's someone who has just had a love of the ocean. And a lot of people don't identify themselves as an aggressive go-getter thrill seeker. They're like me. They read books in their spare time and they garden, and they don't have to be doing dangerous things. So being, a 51-year-old female who crawls into a shark cage, I'm not very big. You've seen Ewan. Ewan dwarfs me. Yeah. But once we get on the boat, we're all equal. We're all people who have a dream and a love of something. And I find that everybody has a really good story if I'm willing to dig deep enough to get to it. So my knowledge and my experience, plus the fact that I don't look like what most people think a shark diver will look like, right, has helped me build a really good community.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that because Ewan, for example, like before I got the opportunity to sit down and talk to him, he's a guy who looks intimidating. Yeah. Like if we were in a bar and he said hey to me in the wrong tone of voice, I would probably like die inside because I was like, this dude could kill me. And then you talk to him and he's so smart and like, I don't know, it's and when you mentioned like the dude bro, I just imagine like we're gonna see sharks and we got Mountain Dew. Like you guys ready to throw down?
Exactly. And there are plenty of those people that go out there and they're I want to ride a shark guys. And honestly, they don't fit with our group because our group wants to see the sharks. We want to respect the environment. We want to respect the crew, the people that take us there. And their livelihood depends on us following the rules. So, you mentioned Ewan. Yeah, he's this big, huge, burly guy. And having him as my partner helps a lot because we couldn't be any more different when you look at us. Oh, but sure. We have the exact same vibe when it comes to everything we do, whether it's photography, which he's been teaching me, or crochet, or whatever we do, we both do it passionately and with the hope that we can help and teach and learn with as many people as possible.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. It's I don't know, like it seems like, and especially again, we've been talking now like over social media for, it's been about a year, which is crazy, but it seems to me the vibe that I got from you in talking is not only are you like, hey, I want you to experience these animals, because it seems like it would be almost like an out of body experience just to be in the presence of something that massive. but then you've got all of these facts, and like, I mean, you sent me in the mail, like you sent me sheets of like, you know, this is what this fin is, or this is how we identify them, stuff like that. So it seems like not only do you have a passion for like, hey, let me take you out and give you this experience, but like when you leave, do you know more? You know, are you a little bit more educated? What do you think? Do you think that's something that you get from your dad as well? It's like, I've learned this and now I got to share it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that just drives me crazy, and I shouldn't say this out loud, but I will, is Shark Week. The amount of misinformation that goes out on Shark Week is mind-boggling. And from my dad, I learned that it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to correct things if something's wrong. So I've had a lifetime of verifying. Like my dad would say, what are your sources? How do you know that? How did you find that out? So as I got into the shark diving, I would watch Shark Week and there'd be a female shark swimming by and they'd say, this male shark. I'm like, what do you mean that male shark? That's a female. It's so obvious. So I think my record in watching Shark Week is I can make it about 6 minutes before I have to shut it off. But correcting that misinformation is important to me because what you see on Shark Week, again, is all the 5 seconds of aggressive biting, not the 10 minutes of beautiful swimming where the sharks were coming by and making eye contact with you and peacefully checking you out while you were checking them out. So sharing that knowledge and helping people see that sharks are not out there trying to eat us. If they wanted to eat us, the cage is designed to keep us in. It's not designed to keep them out. They could get in if they wanted to get in. They just don't want to. So helping people learn that this creature that so many people have like a mortal fear of is not what it's made out to be is pretty important to me.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, talking about Jaws, like Jaws is one of those films. I was born in 85, so Jaws was before my time, but I remember my dad talking about like, he went and saw Jaws and he couldn't take a pee in the bathroom because he was afraid the shark was going to swim up the toilet.
Right. Yeah.
So like there was this huge fear. And I will say like, it is for me personally, it's one of the few horror films I think that, and I don't even know if I would necessarily call it a horror film. I think it's more of like a thriller than it is necessarily like, but it's one of those few films that still holds up today. Like we could get done. I could sit on the couch if Jaws is on. I'm going to sit down and watch it. I've seen it like 300 times. Mm-hmm. To me, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but it's because they are such, I mean, just in scale, like, like, and again, I've never been in a cage. I've never been that close to one, but like just imagining in scale of me standing next to it, it seems like that would be very intimidating. So, I mean, do you think that's because I mean, I know kids now are still like watching it for the first time. They're like, I don't want to go to the beach. We went to Dauphin Island and it got rained out, but they were going to play Jaws. You could watch it on the beach. So like, they're still playing it, to kind of evoke those feelings. So do you think that's kind of what I guess I'll say, I don't, as much as I love Richard Dreyfuss and Roy Schneider, I don't think it's them that's kind of keeping that movie so fresh. I think it's that, very real fear.
Yeah. And you're looking at a creature that most people have very little chance of ever encountering. So what they know of it is only what they've seen in the media. And what they've seen in the media is generally two things: the movie Jaws, in which the shark is constantly hunting humans. Sharks don't hunt humans, but in the movie, the shark is hunting humans. And then you watch Shark Week, where a lot of the shows you see portray it as if the sharks are kind of hunting the divers, which also isn't the case. The amount of time those people spend in the water to get that footage, and then the editing they do to just show you the bites, has really given people the idea that sharks are mindless killing machines. So as much as I love Jaws, and I think it's held up beautifully, you're right. It's not the actors. It's the size, the scope, and the fear of something you can't see. And we talk a lot with people that come with us that when you're in the cage, you've got basically one sense. You can see. You don't have your hearing. You don't have, smell. You can't really touch things because you don't see it. So when something the size of a Volkswagen sneaks up on you, it's a little spooky. It still gets me. But trying to help people understand that sharks they're not there trying to attack us. They're not there trying to get us. The open mouth things are them going for bait, not them going for us. So.
Yeah, and I think you see that a lot too in the photos that you guys share. It's like you drag the bait behind. You'll see them, they'll jump out of the water and you get these incredible shots, but it's not like they're not ramming the cage.
No.
And yeah, it was interesting talking to Ewan because it's and I wanted to ask you this too. So he had mentioned a story where he was like laying in the cage and the shark just kind of kept swimming and then going down and coming up. And he said he could feel his heart. Like he was excited. So it seemed like the shark picked up on that and he was excited. So he's like, let me keep doing this trick. You know what I mean? Have you had any moments? Is that the cat?
Yeah. Hi, Nat.
Sounds like a baby. It was like, is there a baby in the room?
She's like 1 million years old. She's deaf. She's got heart problems, kidney problems, thyroid problems, and she's the most amazing cat on the planet. So pardon her while she talks.
No, that's fine. And it seems like you still have that caregiver in you too. If it's like just making sure this cat has tons of love, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But I was wondering, like, have you had any moments like that? Like, have you had any moments where you're in the cage and you're like, oh, I'm connecting with this thing, in a way that like someone would never think you were able to? Yeah,
I've had 2 situations that come to mind right away. One is a shark that's been seen at Guadalupe for many years. His name's Zapata. He's probably a 16-foot male. And I always say Zapata's like the show-off kid in a class. It's like, hey, look at me. But Zapata was like my sharky boyfriend. And I swear I would get up in the morning and go out to the back of the boat before the cages were open. And he'd pop his head up. And sharks don't spy hop that often. But it was as if he knew we were coming to see him. And he would come up to say, guys, I'm here. Are you ready? And then when I get in the cage, I have a lot of pictures where Zapata would swim up to me and use his nose to bump my camera. So it sounds, strange. And they'll tell us, if a shark comes towards you, hold steady, because sharks don't like to touch hard objects. If it hits your camera, it's going to swim off. But Zapata would come in with like this big smile almost. And I know sharks aren't human. I know I can't say it's a smile. But we'd be making eye contact. He'd be going slowly. He'd bump me, and then he'd just kind of swim off. So, and it happened more with me than with anybody else that would go. So it was just this weird connection that we had. And then the second situation was a case where a shark I hadn't seen before went swimming past and made a really strange turn. Like I've seen the sharks enough to know when a movement just seems off. And something about me or my camera interested him, because he came straight at me, opened his jaws right in front of me, and then gently bit down on my camera. And then he let it go and swam away. But in both cases, they made eye contact with me. And it was like they were letting me know that they weren't trying to do anything. They just wanted to figure something out. So,
yeah. And that's one of the things that I found really interesting that I learned, because again, and stuff like Jaws and Shark Week, like Shark Week, we went to Orange Beach one year, and the year that we were there, we went during Shark Week and we put it on, and then we're like, oh, we can't go in the ocean. Like, it's, you know what I mean? So, cause it does, it's just like, oh, it amplifies that fear, I think, to something that, like, from a statistical chance is probably very unlikely that you're going to run into a great white. But, one thing I did learn is that when it's, particularly great white sharks, when they do bite a person or attack a person, it's not necessarily like they're attacking them, but they're just kind of check, like, are you a fish? Are you? And from what I understand, it's, they bite once, and if you're not a fish, they are like, okay, I'm not interested, but they're just, like you said, the size of a Volkswagen. So, if you get bit once, that's right. Pretty much all you get one bite, and that's all you get, And
sharks don't have hands. If we want to figure something out, we touch it. If sharks want to figure something out, they mouth it. And we've seen sharks that were new to Guadalupe or new to us, And it was obvious they hadn't been around the cages because they'll swim up to the cage or the boat and they go slowly, and then they'll use their mouth to kind of feel along the boat just so that they can get a sense of what it is. And think about it. Sharks don't like hard objects. That's going to be a danger to them no matter what it is. Is it a rock? Is it a boat? It's probably not something that's going to be beneficial. So when they have something new to them, like a cage or the shark boat, it's fascinating to me to watch the new sharks try to solve the puzzle with their mouth. So
yeah, it seems like it's, I don't know, it's almost like shark braille. You know what I mean? It's like watching someone read the bumps with their fingers and things like that. It's very interesting. And it made a lot of sense too, because it was like, oh yeah, like if you're that big and you see something splashing, you don't know if it's a seal or something that's going to be delicious or, the side of a surfboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We look like seals when we look like
wetsuits,
really poor swimmers for seals. Humans, we splash a lot and we're not fast. We flounder. So we look a lot like what their normal prey would be, which is something injured. And their normal way to test prey is to come up from the bottom. So, they can't really see what you are from under there. So when they hit and take that bite and realize you're not what they thought you were, like you said, they're big enough and have enough bite force that a lot of times, even though they didn't intend anything, it does not work out in our favor.
Yeah, it's, again, they seem like very interesting animals, but I don't know if I'd want to be the test subject.
No, there's always the joke of, for $1 million, would you swim from here to the shore at Guadalupe? And chances are you'd be fine, but I'm never going to test the theory.
You just got to call Zapata.
Yeah, man. I'll write them on in there. Yeah,
I need a security. You keep the other ones away.
Yeah. But that people have gone diving there and have been free diving. They have tags and monitors that they dive down to check all those things, and they've done it without incident. So I'm just too scared to do it.
Yeah, well, and it almost seems like too where you guys go. It seems like they are fed so well because you guys are dragging bait to get pictures and stuff like that. It's like you definitely it feels like you guys almost like reward them for coming out to play. You're like, get something to eat. So it seems like someplace like that, maybe the chances, if they're well fed, the chances probably wouldn't be that high that something's like, I'm looking for a snack,
The interesting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
At Guadalupe, there's elephant seals and fur seals. So the sharks feed on these animals that are also massive, a lot bigger than we are. So they'll come through and we'll see a shark one day and it's a certain size, and it'll come through the next day and it looks pregnant because it just ate an entire elephant seal. So what we're throwing out as bait is chunks of tuna. And it's kind of like if you or I were walking through our kitchen and I saw a Cheeto on the floor. Like some days I might pick it up and eat it. Some days I might leave it there. But for a shark, what we're giving them as bait is such a small item and so little caloric value that it's not really in their benefit all the time to be eating those or going after those. So we try not to give them the bait. We try to keep it away from them so that we're A, not rewarding them and teaching them that behavior, and B, because it's really not, it's not the thing that's going to get them full. Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wanted to ask you this because I remember talking to you and he had mentioned that, this was something that you were pretty passionate about, but I wanted to talk about the preservation aspect because I know that that's been a big concern for you guys is, people like poaching sharks and so talk to me a little bit about what some of the dangers they face from outside sources, because being a great white, I'm sure there's not too many animals in the ocean that are like, hey, let me buck up to you. I'm sure there's not a lot of people higher on the food chain, but it seems like most of the things that would be doing destruction to them as a species would be from, the outside.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. The things that we worry most about, and I'll speak specifically to the Guadalupe shark population, are obviously poaching. We learned about the population at Guadalupe from fishermen. which is they'd go out there fishing for tuna, and then they'd lose their catch as it was coming into the boat because the sharks would take it. There's a huge market for shark teeth. So great white shark teeth, they sell for a lot of money in the markets, and it's not, et cetera. So we have to worry about that. We worry about incidents with boats and other vehicles. We've seen sharks who've had fins sliced off, and it's pretty apparent that they got too close to a propeller. I worry about fishing gear. We've seen an influx in the last couple of years of sharks who've had something wrapped around them, some sort of plastic ocean, trash, that as they've tried to grow, that plastic is choking them and killing them. So those are our biggest fears with that Guadalupe population are, poaching, and then having them run into too many boats, too many people. And honestly, even cage dive operations that don't follow the rules can also be a danger to the sharks. I'm a stickler for the rules, and people that go with me tease me a little bit about that. But we need to do all the right things to make sure that the sharks aren't getting stuck in a cage, that they're not getting damaged on our boat, that we're not touching them or doing things that might change their world dramatically and negatively.
So, when you say that people are breaking the rules, because, and I think for someone who's listening, it's like, well, you're in a cage and, just, kind of looking what are the rules that you guys follow, and what are the rules that people should be following when they're out doing something like that?
Yeah. To me, the most important rule is we don't touch the sharks, and the sharks get close. They'll swing past within arm's reach of the cage. So you can put your hand out and grab a fin. You can put your hand out and run it down the side of a great white shark. But the number one rule of scuba diving is you don't touch things. And it's the very same when we're in the shark cage, not only to protect the sharks, but what can happen is you're busy watching the shark that's in front of you. You've stuck your arm out, or heaven forbid, you've stuck your whole head out of a cage, and you're watching the shark go this way, and another shark swings in behind you that you don't see coming. Now, you've just invited a potential accident because you did not stay behind the barrier. So to me, staying in the cage and not trying, don't grab things, don't touch things, don't try to hold a fin, let the sharks be sharks and let us view it like a reverse zoo. But that's the biggest thing. We have had incidents at Guadalupe with operators who let people get out of the cage. Those folks were caught, obviously, and fined, and the operation shut down. But all it takes is one incident where it would have been the human's fault for doing that. But if a shark mistook them for prey, none of us get to go back anymore. So.
Yeah, and it's crazy, too, because, it's so dark. And then for something so big, it's surprising how quickly they could just, it's like, I make a joke with my wife, I'll sneak up on her sometimes and I tell her I'm like a cat. I'm like a very fat, slow cat, but I'm a cat. So it's surprising how something that big can be so agile, and how it has the ability just to, like you said, it comes up from below. So if you're not, paying attention, and like I said, I wouldn't want to be on the other side of them, trying to figure something out. So let me ask you this. So someone like Zapata, right?
Yeah.
Because you sent me some information about how you identify the sharks, and if you found one that's not identified, then you can name it and it gets put in this book. So how many years or how many trips, I guess, do you see, did you see Zapata? If you go back, do you still see him now, or is he kind of around? Or I guess I'm just wondering, because I know from what I understand, they travel different times of the year, follow the food source. But I think about those videos of there's a famous video of this guy who had lion cubs when they were little, and he trained them and raised them. And then he comes back when they're adults and they jump on him and are hugging on him. They recognize him. So do you have any experiences like that where it's been, a good number of visits and all of a sudden you're like, hey, my boy's back,
I haven't seen Zapata now since 2015. So I hope I get to have that experience. He has been seen at Guadalupe, just not on trips I've been at since that year. So, but what you asked previously about conservation, this sort of ties into my biggest push on the conservation at Guadalupe, and I've actually got their shirt on today. A group called Marine Conservation Science Institute, sorry, I forgot what the I was. They do the tracking of the sharks that are at Guadalupe. So what we do after every trip is we take every piece of film we have, good picture, bad picture, doesn't matter, and we send it to MCSI, and they work with us to identify which sharks were at the island during which period, which sharks were around other sharks, which sharks haven't been seen for a while. So something as simple as all of our clients being willing to turn over their film has been a massive help in the conservation efforts, because we now know that there's over 366 individual sharks that have been seen there. For the first probably 8 to 10 years that I went diving, we only knew of about 150, but it's because so few people were supplying video or photos. So as more people have become aware of how easy it is to participate simply by providing the film that you took to take home to your family and friends, it's given us a much broader sense of the shark population at Guadalupe.
Well, and I guess like for people who are listening who may not understand why it is as important it is for them to have that information, kind of fill us in a little bit as far as, why that's beneficial to, helping maintain and preserve them.
Yeah. We've learned a lot through that tracking, and you add the trackers that they put on the fins to the data that we provide at Guadalupe, and we now know that of the Guadalupe population, a majority of the male sharks come in every single year, and the female sharks, when they're younger, will come every year until they're considered a subadult or an adult and can get pregnant. And at that point, they become an even or an odd shark is what I call them, because they start coming back on alternate years. So through tracking which sharks appear every year, we can say, let's pick one, Baggers was here in like 2007, 2008. She missed 2009, but was back in 2010. So the chances that she had a baby in between is really strong based on what we now know of the female patterns and the male patterns. It's also given us a lot of information on migrations in terms of the smaller sharks come in first. So our subadults seem to roll in July and August, and then the larger females will roll in later. But understanding this, and then understanding when the population seems to disappear for a while, because we've had years that we didn't see much, and trying to figure out what happened then, were there orcas in the area, was something going on. But just knowing which sharks are there gives us a sense of lifespan, gives us a sense of growth. I've watched some, Jenny Walmsley is this little tiny thing. She's probably 7-8 feet. And every year she grows into her fins. She's like a puppy, with those big puppy feet. So we're able to sense how much are sharks growing every year, because if we see them return and we know which one is which, we can then start gauging all those different factors.
So you mentioned Baggers. So
yeah.
So when she's coming into Guadalupe, is she coming in then, like, is it like almost like a Temptation Island kind of thing where she's like, all right, all the boys are here, and then
we think we think they get pregnant out in the open ocean. And this is, no one's ever videoed or seen white sharks mate. But the assumption that a lot of us have, and this is, I cannot scientifically prove this, but sharks need to be moving because they are ram ventilators. They need water to move through their gills. So when they mate, it's pretty violent. And we know this because we'll see the females with these massive bites right around their gills. So the assumption is, let me see here, that the male will kind of grab onto the female at the gills. And the males have two claspers, so whichever side of the shark, the female they're on, they're still able to mate. But when this happens, the sharks start to drop. And I call it like the love spiral, but they need a lot of depth so that while they're mating and they're sinking down, they don't just hit the bottom. So there's a place called the Sofa, which is basically between California and Hawaii. And the assumption is that that's where the sharks go to mate. Whether they're from the California group, the Guadalupe group, they all seem to head to that area. They somehow find each other in this massive open ocean. They mate and then they return back to either the location they started, or for the females, they roll to an area where they have a nursery.
It's funny to me that it's called the Sofa.
Yeah.
it's like Barry White.
Trying to think, it's shared offshore foraging area, I think is what it is. But really, it's just an empty place right in the middle of the ocean.
Now, when they start spiraling, is that so like as they're going down, they're moving down, so the water is it's
still ventilating.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're not really having to like swim in one direction, but it's just that we can kind of free fall and gravity does what it's supposed to do.
And again, this is an assumption, but I've discussed the theory with a lot of people who know a lot more about sharks than I do. And we think the theory holds weight. So.
Yeah. And it's crazy. And it's crazy, but it's also not surprising because the ocean is so big. And then, there's still things that the ocean is scary to me. Yeah. Like I like the ocean if I can like see the bottom, or I think I would be okay in a cage with other people.
Right.
But like, as soon as I'm going and I can't see and I'm more scared of jellyfish than I am of like, sharks or anything like that. But just thinking about like what could potentially be where we can't go, it's like space on the ground. It's very strange. Also, like maybe you know this, but like how far down can the great white, or do we not know, I guess?
I don't know. I'm sure that information is available, but that's not something I've got in my wheelhouse. I'll find that out and let you know, because now I'm going to be curious and go down a rabbit hole. Hang on. My second cat is now helping us. Carlos, get down.
No, that's no problem at all. Yeah. It's just, I wonder like, with humans, we can only go so low because of the pressure. And I didn't know with them being so large, if maybe it was the.
Yeah. And the way their bodies are made, they can take an awful lot of pressure of the depth, whereas we can't, we're going to explode. But the sharks, the way that their cartilage is and the way that their body mass is, they can definitely get pretty deep.
Well, and I wanted to ask you this too. So do you have, because, Be a Shark, you guys focus specifically on great white sharks and kind of dispelling some of the myths about them and things like that. Do you have the same interest in any others? Because I believe it's either like tiger sharks or bull sharks are like the aggressive ones.
Yeah.
Like the ones that like to come into shallow. Those are the ones. I'm not scared of a great white, but I'm scared of like the back of the calf in the shallow water, Do you have that? Do you have any interest in those other species, or for you, has it always just been like, nah, these are the ones that I'm all about?
I would gladly go on a trip with to see any of the other sharks. But for me, it's the great whites. It's something that's just so majestic and beautiful about the way they move. And, I joke around that they're like the Labrador retrievers of the shark world, because they'll swim up, and if you see them, they're like, oh, you saw me. Whereas, like you said, bulls and tigers, they're like, you saw me. Rah.
Right.
And I'm afraid of that. I don't want to get bitten. I'm nervous around those kind of creatures. But I've seen the whites enough, and I can sense, not that I know what they're thinking, but I've watched their behavior enough that there's times where I'll pull my guests to the middle of the cage and we just kind of go, crazy shark. Like one of them's just acting a little different. And I don't have that same feel or understanding of other sharks. So I would be entirely dependent on someone else to teach me what they knew. But it's just never been something that's, called to me and said, you have to come do this the way that Guadalupe and the white sharks do.
Yeah, because it's, I believe it's either the bull shark or the tiger shark that can actually go into fresh water too.
Yeah.
And that's that's where the whole like mythology of Jaws started.
Yes.
Was like one of them swam upriver to New Jersey and was like taking people out in the old timey like bathing suits.
Yeah.
Like where they had like full like feather hats on their bathing suits. But you mentioned like, crazy shark. Like, have you had any moments? Because it seems like you're pretty comfortable in the cage, and it it's weird because it feels almost like, like you mentioned, like a Labrador running up. Like I've had encounters where I've been out on the street and a dog has run up to me, and you can kind of feel the intent of like, oh, this dog just wants to be, petted and loved on, or one that's like, hey man, don't get too close to me. Have you ever had any moments when you're in the cage? Because I mean, at the end of the day, these are still, giant predators. So have you had any moments where you're like, oh, I'm not sure what this guy's looking to do or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. In, I want to say 2014, we had a shark that we were calling Crazy Ivan because we didn't know his actual name yet. But when he'd come around, he would look at us in kind of like it felt like he was sizing us up. And every circle he made just got a little tighter. And everything just felt off about the way this shark was moving. And I was with a couple other people who've spent time in the water there as well. And we have a weird language, you can't talk underwater, but we have like this weird language of, hand signals and stuff. And I looked at my friend Matt, and he looked back at me, and we both just immediately did this. And we realized, let's step to the center of the cage, because if we're, right on the edge and something does happen, we're better off, if we're a little further away from the shark. And when we got out, we talked to the dive masters about it, kind of let them know what we saw. But his actual name was Oscar. Oscar's energy was just weird. And his movements were just off enough that more people than just me said, this just doesn't feel right. I've had it happen maybe twice since, but for much shorter periods. Oscar stuck with us for a long time, and he made me nervous.
Well, it's funny too, because it's like, and you mentioned this earlier when you were talking about Zapata, but he was like the class, show off. And it's funny to think of animals like this that are, again, they have this image of just, they eat everything in sight, and they're, like small, they're, like people, I've heard a lot of people refer to them as like, they're pretty much dinosaurs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then to like spend time with them and realize that like each one almost, it's like the Spice Girls of the sharks. It's like each one has like a different personality, and it seems like Oscar was just kind of like the Oscar the Grouch kind of.
Yeah, very
what are you
much.
doing here, I know you mentioned that the cages are designed to keep you in, not keep the sharks out.
Right.
So like by that, do you mean like if they really wanted to, they could just be like, see you later, cage?
Yeah. There are a couple things to remember. Sharks don't have a reverse, which part of why we chose the name Be a Shark is we always want to be moving forward. But if a shark wanted to get in the cage, all it has to do is ram it and shake around, and it's going to tear that cage to pieces. Now, you don't see that happen because sharks don't want to do that. And that's why I tell people, that it's not to keep the shark out. If the shark wants in, if it wanted to eat us, this business would have been nothing. I mean, we never would have gotten started with this business because Guadalupe wouldn't be Guadalupe. But, the sharks have so much power. And I've seen sharks that were big enough that, the Leonardo da Vinci, what is it, Vesuvius Man, where he's standing like this, where I firmly believe I could have stood like that in the shark's mouth. If that shark wanted to get into that cage, it could have gotten it would have been like opening a can.
That's like a Tic Tac.
Yeah, exactly.
Pop it in. I wanted to ask you this. So first of all, your tattoo, the sleeve, is that new?
Yeah, it is.
I think I saw the drawing on Instagram of like so that's like pretty fresh, huh?
This is Joe Flores is an artist who was with me the last time I went to Guadalupe. And I'd been wanting a shark tattoo for a long time, but I couldn't find anybody that understood the vibe I was going for, because I don't see the sharks as frightening. I didn't want like a big mouth thing. I wanted something kind of ethereal and the way I see Guadalupe. So I was able to spend some time with Joe recently, and we're about halfway. So we've got a diver my friend Angela diving on the back.
That's awesome.
We have a shark picture I took, another one I took, and then the background is from the picture of Ewan's that you've seen with the shark at the surface.
That's awesome.
So Joe's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah. And if you're listening and not watching on YouTube, you can go to Nikki's Instagram. It's Nick, Nik _in_a_ cage, right? There's the underscores. Right. Mm-hmm. So Nick in a cage on Instagram, you can see the mock-up of it. I wanted to talk to you about it because I didn't know like if they were just mapping it out. And then when I saw you, I was like, oh, okay. I've always wanted a half sleeve, but like I am just a coward. So
Joe, I have nothing but good things to say about him because first of all, he was so good at, we spent about 5 hours in person figuring out what the design should look like after spending a lot of time on the phone talking about it. So we weren't going to do anything until we knew we both loved it. And then like I faint with a flu shot. I'm so bad with needles. And his touch was so light that I sat for about 5 hours for that first sitting. And I'm going back in June for the next sitting where we're going to try to do 6 to 8 to finish it. But he's so light that it's amazing.
Yeah, I've always wanted to do the cover of Abbey Road with
yes.
And then have them just all walking around the arm.
Yep.
And then anybody I've talked to, they're like, yeah, man, that's going to be like 19 hours. And I'm like, well, okay, well, maybe a little bit later down the line. And then now I'm like, why would you put a bumper sticker on a Mercedes? So just, that's just my rationale or excuse to be like, I'm afraid of needles. So.
Well, if I tell people, if you aren't sure you want a tattoo, don't get a tattoo.
Yeah. I'm the oldest of 4 and my siblings all have them. And since COVID hit, I haven't seen them. So the next time I go home, we've all talked about getting one. It'll be my first and they're all their like 7th or 10th or something like that. But we're going to get like some kind of sibling tattoo or something like that. So that'll be that. I'm okay with starting there, I think, so.
Yeah, I have others that were smaller, so I wouldn't suggest starting with a sleeve.
Yeah, that's my thing though, is that's also my personality where it's like, oh, if I'm going to get into this, like I started a podcast and was like, I want the nicest mic. I've never done one, but like I want a nice mic.
No, I hear you.
Well, I wanted to ask you this, you've been doing this now since you said 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Like how long do you kind of see yourself being able to do this? Do you have any plans for like when you can't do it anymore? Like, and I mean, that might be a little bit of like a dark kind of question, but I just, I didn't know like, do you see Be a Shark kind of being a thing that like lives and dies with you, or do you see it going beyond you?
I believe that someone will be there when Ewan and I aren't to carry the torch for the sharks at Guadalupe. A story you and I have talked about before was my Aunt Joyce, who was 74 years old. And all she ever wanted to do was go shark diving with me, but she wasn't able to do it because she was taking care of her husband, things like that. So after her husband passed away, my Aunt Joyce went to scuba class and she was terrible at scuba class. So her instructor had to like meet with her on weekends for like 4 months longer than a typical scuba class, but she was determined to get her scuba license. And then her first dive trip was going to Guadalupe with me. So, we joke, live like Joyce, because Joyce got out there at 74 years old and got into a shark cage. Unfortunately, she had a heart issue about 5 months after that and passed away. So for us, that whole idea of living like Joyce became even more important, because had we not taken the opportunity to go when we had that chance, I never would have had the chance again. So I feel like someone will come along when I can't go anymore. And I plan to go for a long time. One of my favorite shark diving friends is actually my Papa Frank. He is in his 70s, and you can't get that man out of the cage. Like, you just cannot. And I joke around that when I'm at the point where I can't get in and out of the cage, the dive masters are just going to have to put me on their back like a backpack, carry me into the cage, and lift me back out. So even if it hits a point where all I can do is go on the boat and watch, I still hope I can do that. I think Ewan's kids are growing up loving this. I have 2 nephews that know all the shark names. So with luck, we'll be able to pass this on to someone else that feels the same way we do about the animals out there.
Yeah. And Ewan's kids are, shout out to Ewan for amazing genetics. His kids are adorable.
Yes.
I sent them t-shirt. We did a shark design and I sent them t-shirts, and these just, they look like, it's fun to see kids who look like they're just so happy that he's their dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get in a Nerf gun fight with them. They will ruin you.
They're assassins.
Oh my gosh. They slaughtered me.
Yeah. We have, my daughter is 2 and she just got her first Nerf gun, and she's not big enough yet to like kind of cock it back, and I have to load the darts for her. But then I'm like, all right, well, let me load the weapon so that you can shoot your dad. Here you go. So,
Ewan's wife was trying to keep them from shooting at me, and she said, go upstairs, and they'd come downstairs and say, come up. And I'd go up and they'd ambush me, and I'd go back downstairs and they'd come down and ask me to go again. And then they realized that it was getting repetitive. So his youngest came downstairs and goes, will you come upstairs with us? We have cake. So yeah, great kids, great experience, but I'm excited for the point when we can put them in the cage, and they're not that far from it, you know? Yeah,
that's awesome. And it's, you know, I don't know, it feels like it's, I grew up playing in bands and traveling and, you know, sleeping in Walmart parking lots because we didn't have any place to stay. And, you know, part of me hopes that my daughter like has that same love of music that I do. And then part of me is also like, but don't sleep in like parking lot, like, you know, or like be better than me. So that's nothing that you have to ever, you know, worry about. So it's great. I think it's just interesting to kind of think of, you know, you've started something that means so much to so many people. And then, you know, you've got nephews and kids, and it's, you know, kind of thinking about like what that next generation could be, especially if they are showing the interest. And
we're looking at a kids trip for next year.
That's awesome.
I took a 12-year-old nephew of mine a few years back, and he was small for his age. So like he basically could have slipped out of any bar of the cage at any point, but having him there was just amazing. So we're looking at putting together a kids trip for 2022.
Now, would you do like smaller cages for them, or is it still the same kind of cage? You just
same cage. And, you know, ultimately it comes down to the child. Like, what is their maturity level? You know, can they be on a boat with nothing to do and not freak out? So if you've got the right kid, they're going to love it out there.
Yeah, my daughter tries to ride the dog. So
yeah,
like,
she's not quite ready yet.
Yeah, she'd be the one that you're like, no accidents, no touching the shark. Yep. So I want to ask you this, like, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who have been like, oh man, like, I mean, I'm one of them. I'm one of those people that has been like, that would be an amazing experience. And especially getting to know like you, and if I ever go, like, I know who I'm going with, you know what I mean?
Thank you.
But I like for people who like may be interested, but are like on the fence, or they're not sure like what to expect, like what would be some tips or pointers or kind of like maybe even like motivational words to be like, hey, come out, it's worth it.
Yeah. You know, I was actually talking about this 2 days ago with someone, because we were complaining about how so many of the ads out there cater to your agro boys. And like I said, that's not a majority of the people who are interested in or in love with sharks. So if it's something you've always wanted to do, talk to people who go out there. Call me. I'll spend hours on the phone. And before you book with anyone, spend a lot of time on the phone with them and make sure that their vibe is your vibe. You know, if you want to be with an aggressive group that's really out there just to be raw, I can put you in touch with those people. You don't have to book with us. If you're looking for an experience where you get educated, you learn about, you know, the sharks' behaviors, which sharks you see, and it's more of a kind of a spiritual experience in a way, then get on the boat with us. And I promise you're going to fit in with us.
Yeah. It seems like for you guys, it's almost, I would kind of akin it to like going to church. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a very religious person, but I have like, there's things like, if I pick up the guitar and I find a riff and I'm like, oh man, like I haven't, like, this is new to me, and I dig into it. Like for me, that's kind of like, oh, this is my like spiritual moment. This is like, I feel connected with the universe. Right. And I can imagine it's probably very similar for someone like you, just being like, you know, I hear the gospel when I'm in the cage. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right. And people are very different, you know, and I try to get to know the people that will be on the trip with me before we go. Some folks have anxiety and they're really nervous about sharing a cabin with someone or being on a boat with people. Or what if I have a panic attack? I have anxiety. I've had panic attacks. So I think that one of the best things about Be a Shark is we can relate with a lot of that. And if you're an introvert and you prefer to be by yourself and writing in your journal or doing your thing, we get that. And we're not going to pester people to, you know, come over, participate. We just want to make sure that they're comfortable doing the trip their way and that we know in advance kind of what they want to get out of it so that we can help facilitate that. You know, not everybody's Nikki, not everybody's Ewan. So what we're looking for isn't always what somebody else wants. And part of our goal is to make sure we help people get what it is they need out of that trip. So yeah, it is kind of spiritual, like a church.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I hope one day you know, you sent me in the mail, you sent me that big Be a Shark magnet, and we had and for literally weeks, my daughter was holding it and just running, like anything that she could stick it to, she would stick it and then take it off and then be like, look, Daddy, Mama Shark. And then like stick, you know what I mean? And she just, for some reason, she was super in love with it. Now it's high enough on the fridge that she can't reach it. But it's, I hope that's one of those things I've like kind of picture myself doing, like when she's older, being like, hey, you want to do something real cool, just me and you know what I mean?
Yep.
I wanted to ask too, so COVID happened, you didn't go at all last year.
Nope.
Then you got the green light. You guys are good to go this year. So what was that feeling like when they were like, you can go back? Like, were you dancing? Were you?
I cried, honestly. We never gave up hope and we kept planning for the trips. And we'd had people who were booked for last year who didn't get to go. So we've stayed in touch with those folks and been really honest and said, you know, we didn't know if it was going to happen, but we were going to move forward as if it was, you know, a for real thing. So the day that I got the text message from with the announcement, the proclamation that opened the Guadalupe National Park, you know, it's a marine preserve. So we needed the Mexican government to open it so that we could go. The day that we got that, I just kind of sat and cried a lot because it felt like I finally get to go home, and all these emotions of missing the sharks, missing the island. I miss the crew on the boat. They're my friends. You know, I appreciate all the things they do for us. So realizing that something I thought might be over for good, because we never had a guarantee that the island would open again. And a large shark diving company had already bailed out and said it's not going to open. So we kind of felt like we were winging a prayering it. So getting that news was emotional enough that I kind of couldn't even react for a few days. I let Ewan know, but it was probably 3 or 4 days before I was able to tell my clients, because I kept thinking, what if they take it back?
Right. You don't want to jump the gun. Mm-hmm. And let me ask you this. Is there, I mean, you guys go to Guadalupe and obviously like you have a connection with that particular area and you've had great experiences there. Is there anywhere else that you would ever see yourself being like, I want to, you know, try going here or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are great shark diving operations in Australia and South Africa. And I've been really lucky to meet some of the folks that work at those groups. And some of the dive masters have moved around between Guadalupe and those areas. So when I have an opportunity, I would love to hit any of those areas and see their sharks. The populations act differently. The water conditions are different. The sizes are different. So I would really like to do that. The other location that I've been to that scared me to death was the Farallon Islands outside of San Francisco. And
why did that scare you?
It's very murky, and the sharks there are a lot larger than at Guadalupe. They're coming in to eat these massive seals and sea lions, and it's not uncommon to see, you know, an 18-foot shark there. So you mix murky water where you can't see your hand in front of your face. And I had the opportunity to do a cage free dive there. And I'll be honest, I found a rock on the bottom and I hid behind it.
Yeah,
I was nervous.
Well, yeah, and especially when you talk about like things sneaking up and like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't, like, I don't know, man. Like that's that I think I would have to do the cage. I think like I would have a panic attack in the water, which probably wouldn't be a great place to have one.
No, and I was kind of the same way. We lowered a cage down and then we were able to get out and swim. And I did well until something flew by from behind me and it was a sea lion. And then I started thinking, what the hell's chasing the sea lion?
Right.
So I
look like a sea lion?
Yeah. So I swam myself back to the cage while the other people in my group that were paired up and stayed out. But I sat in the cage. It was like my little bird cage. And I thought I'm perfectly happy right here watching, because I don't enjoy that fear of it takes all the fun out of it for me when I have to be worried that I'm going to cause an incident because I'm a human and can't see behind me, you know?
Right. And you don't want to be the one that like, I ruined the trip because I'm the one that got bit by it.
That, and I kind of want to live to go shark diving more. Right. So yeah. Right. Yep.
Well, and I did want to ask you this because we mentioned it kind of off the top, and I did want to ask you because I thought it was very interesting. So you posted a video on social media of Aaron Paul calling you a bitch.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't know, Aaron Paul he played Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about how that came to be, because I watched it and I was like, this is, especially when they did the little montage of him just saying it like 100 times.
Yep.
And I loved your caption because it's like it was something like, this is the only person that would ever be okay to call me this.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I've always really liked Aaron Paul. He was in a music video called, I think, White Trash something, way before he was on Breaking Bad. So I kind of knew who he was. And then when I started watching Breaking Bad, like everybody else, I was just sucked in. I thought it was an amazing show. So Aaron Paul did a fundraiser through a group called Omaze, where you can buy basically tickets to hopefully win prizes. So I liked what he was raising money for. It was an anti-bullying campaign. And this was right at the height of people really struggling with that. So I made a donation and I ended up winning a video from Aaron Paul where he called me bitch. So
anti-bullying.
Yes, anti-bullying, which I realize sounds so funny. But having Jesse Pinkman say, Nikki CV, you're a bitch, was fabulous. And the best part is they also sent me a baggie of the blue ice.
Oh my gosh.
But it was sugar candy, and I like sugar candy, so I ate it all. But I still have the signed baggie. So
that's super cool. Yeah, it's that show just had such just like a cultural significance. I think it's one of those shows that like I'm a huge fan of The Office. Like when that show went off the air, like 2000 like 13 maybe, and it's my daughter's favorite show. Like we watch it together. But I think it's going to be like that, where like years from now, people are going to be showing their kids like it's still on Netflix. You want to watch it all? Yeah. You got 3 days to watch all the seasons.
Yeah, we talked about my dad. The other thing my dad always said that meant a lot to me, because my dad grew up very poor. He said, if you have enough to share, which I thought was a very impactful thing. I didn't really understand it until I got older. But, I try to look for places that we can help or that we can donate. So, participating in Aaron Paul's contest was like the icing on the cake of actually making a donation that could help something. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so I wanted to ask this. So you guys, when is the next trip for you guys? Is it
109 days?
Okay. So are you looking at, is it August or
August?
Okay.
August 16th, we will board the boat and make our way out towards Guadalupe. August 17th, we'll be in the water.
Okay. Cause it's, I know if I remember correctly from speaking with you, and you guys normally go twice a year, right? Is it like one in August and then one in October, or like around that time? So this year, are you still planning for the 2 trips business as usual, or is it,
No,
I mean, as long as nothing changes, obviously.
Yeah, we've gotten really lucky. We've had, as we've built our clientele, you and I have only known each other for 4 years, maybe. So we just barely launched Be a Shark the year that COVID hit. So building up our clientele, we have enough people that we have 4 trips this year. We have an August and 2 Octobers on the Solmar 5, which is my very favorite boat at Guadalupe. And then we were recently asked if we would do a Shark ID class
that's awesome.
Yeah, for guests on the Vortex, which is a beautiful boat. And that trip will be in September. All the trips still have at least 1 open space. So if anybody's interested, they can let me know and we'll get them on the boat. But Ewan and I are lucky that we have 4 trips this year. So
now, is it like, for your husband, is it challenging for him when you're like, hey, I'm going to be gone? Or is it kind of like, because you only go a couple times a year, is he more like, all right, well, I'm going to do my thing, I'll see you when you get back? Or is it, I know for some people who travel all the time for work, it can get, or especially if you're in a case like you and where you have kids and stuff like that. But, if it's just like these specific times through the year, I didn't know if it was kind of like the same. Well, I'm going to miss you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's been incredibly supportive, and he likes to go on the trips, and he'll join at least one every year, but it's not his passion. So he's more than happy to drop me off at the airport. He takes care of our cats while I'm gone. And then during the rest of the year, we try to work it out so that we go places that he wants to go, or that we experience other things besides sharks. Because, if it were up to me, that's all we would ever do. Right. And that's not really fair in a relationship. So we try to balance it out for the remainder of the year that, things he wants to do or places he wants to go, if we're going to go together, that we get those things in there. But honestly, if you don't have someone supporting you, I don't know that you could actually pull this off, because I'm out of contact. For 7 days, I have no contact with anybody.
Right. It's not like you get great cell service.
We get no cell service, like zero. So, if having him here keeping things running is a relief, because I know that nothing's going to happen that he can't handle. As a weird aside, I got off the boat one year and I was so excited my phone battery was going to die. So I called him for the first time in 5 days. And I'm like, hey, I had a great trip. It was so awesome. Hope you're doing well. I got to go. My phone's going to die. Bye. And I hang up. Well, he's a contractor, and he had an incident at work where he got a nail shot through the back of his knee.
Oh, no.
So I get a text on my phone of this picture that says, I'm doing great. Thanks.
Thanks for asking.
And I'm like, I'm such a jerk, because I was so excited that I didn't even ask how he was. So for me, I have to remember to be there for him, even when it's shark season, because sometimes it gets all consuming. And
I'm sure it's like fair. A high. Yeah. I'm sure it's like you're like, woo, like, you know what I mean? And I'm imagining like, you going out for the first time after, last year, and it's just going to be like, like I could just imagine being so, like, I was thinking about that too. Like if I was still playing in bands and stuff like that, and they were like, you can play a show tomorrow. Yep. Like in my head, if I was still in that world, in my head, I would just be like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. You know what I mean? So I know you said on your upcoming trips, you've got, a spot or 2 open. Mm-hmm. If someone is interested, what is the best way? I mean, obviously they can reach out to you. We're going to put your Instagram in the show notes. Beashark.team. We'll put that in there as well. But how, like, when you're communicating with people, or people do have questions, things like that, like, what's the best way for you, or what's the easiest way for you to connect with people?
For me, it's whatever's easiest for the person. They can call us. We have an easy number. It's 408-785-SHARK, SHRK. You can text at that number. A lot of people contact me on Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger. So it's whatever's the easiest way for someone to reach us. You can go to our website, www.beashark.team. There's a contact page there. But whatever your comfort is, some people don't like to talk on the phone. Totally get that. So send a text. Well, I'm happy to text. So whatever is easiest for someone in terms of reaching out and making contact is the avenue that I want them to choose.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sitting down and sharing your passion and talking about the things that inspire you. And again, we were talking a little bit before, but I think your story in general of just being, working in that corporate job and then finding, following your passion until you found like the thing for you is totally inspiring. And I hope that people are listening to this and they feel inspired too. And we will, again, we're going to link up the website. We're going to link up your Instagram. We'll put the number in the show notes. I'll also throw, if you guys haven't listened to the episode with Ewan yet, go back and listen to that right after this one. Because again, that's just another story of someone who's just so passionate about what they do. And the fact that you two were able to find each other being, thousands of miles away, the fact that, I think that's just like the galaxy or the universe being like, oh, you guys were supposed to collide at some point,
I agree. And the fact we have families that support the idea, the two of us are like, we're meant to do this. And his wife and my husband said, yes, you guys are. Now go do it. So shout out to Carrie and Chad. So
shout out Carrie and Chad. Yeah, that is, it's a special thing to have people in your corner. You know what I mean? So, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for sitting with me. Do you have time to hang out for a minute or two after we wrap up?
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Well, guys, that is episode number 54. Again, a big thank you to Miss Nikki Brant-Sevy for being here. Beashark.team. Listen, I'm going to bite the bullet and do it eventually. I just need to get over my fear. Maybe you're further along than me. Check it out. Book a trip. Get in the cage. And we will see you guys next week.
Yeah.